Hello YouTube. In this video I'm going to be presenting the Fullbody template and all of the applications that this method of training are going to entail. When you talk about Fullbody training, you can already sort of sense that we're going to have to deal with some issues here because the template is very restrictive. And when you look at training templates like push-pull leg or upper-lower, the more the template forces you to train certain body parts, the tougher it is going to be for you to gain flexibility and freedom. And with a full body, well, it's in the name, you're supposed to train the full body. And therefore, it's going to be tough to navigate around that. So there are a lot of points I'm going to bring up today. But understand that, to me, the full body method has more, or at least brings more problems to the surface than it solves. And so I want to help you avoid all of these pitfalls. And you're going to see that I might say certain things that you disagree with, but understand that I have personally trained full body for 3 years when I was just getting started. And so I actually have a lot of experience with the template. And I also consumed a lot of content from people who do full body. And so I see a lot of the mistakes that I want you to avoid. So, as I said, full body entails you're going to train the entire body, which is every muscle group. But that also means that a lot of people misunderstand the way they're supposed to go about it. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to properly run a full body. Because regardless of if I think the template is good or not, there's always a right or a wrong way to do things. And so for the full body, I think that there are two specific errors that people make, and there's one right way to run them. The first mistake would be to try and have the full body exist with only machines. I see that a ton, people who think, okay, I'm going to do full body, and oh, look at all of those machines. They all work a different muscle group and it's perfectly separated. And so I'm just going to go from a machine to another, and that's full body. To me, that's a circuit. It's a machine circuit. It's something that you see a ton in commercial gyms because for some reason, normies really like it, most likely because it's easy. And you clearly see the limitations of that application of the template when you look at what a machine is. I'll make a full video about machines because I know a lot of people disagree with the idea that they're subpar. I'm going to detail that in the specific segment, but for this, I just want to say that since machines move the weight for you and they decide where the weight is going to move, the trajectory, etc., it becomes easy to think of a full body template as an easy way to just approach training because you're just going to train the full body. And then to jump on machines, which are also the easy way because both dictate exactly what you're supposed to do. The machine just needs you to push or pull, and then it does the rest of the work. And that is going to lead to stagnation. If you stay on that type of training for 2 years, you're going to make minimal gains. So it needs to be avoided. And the same can be said for cables. I mean, of course, I know some people think like this, but they think, okay, full body is every muscle. So in order to be precise, I'm going to hit every muscle in isolation. But think about how long this is going to take. You're supposed to hit the full body, and you're going to do it one exercise at a time. It's not going to work. So scrap that, don't do that. The second would be the exact opposite mindset of saying, okay, full body, I need to hit the entire body. What hits the most body parts at once? Compound movements. Okay, let me just do all of the compound movements, and that's my full body. That would be a novice program. And even then, it would be worse than a novice program because most novice programs have you bench, squat, and row, or deadlift, clean, and pull up, stuff like that. They never have you do deadlift, squat, bench, pull up on the same day, or at least not the few that I know. And so these people tend to have that type of training program implemented, and they, on top of that, tend to be minimalistic. So they just repeat those days again and again. That's a recipe for disaster. You might make gains from it, but you're also going to get obvious injuries, you're going to get plateaus, you're going to be over fatigued because it's too much. If you follow the full body template, but every single muscle group is hit with a compound, understand that the other muscle groups also get hit by the compound. So you're going to have body parts that are hit several times in the training, especially the lower back, and that's just going to lead to catastrophe. So it needs to be avoided too. Compound movements are essential, but you cannot just do them, and you can't do all of the compound movements in the world. They need to be used sparingly. So that needs to be avoided as well. And the issue you see with those people too is that the worst part with that compound movement obsession is they think it's going to get them big across the board. And it doesn't work. Meaning that if you only rely on presses for your triceps, you're going to be very disappointed. If you only rely on rows and chin-ups for your biceps, you're going to have small biceps, because isolation in that case should be used. And that leads me to my third point, which is the proper way to run a full body, which is a use of compound movements completed by isolation. And in reality, any and every template, regardless of its style, regardless of the progression scheme, needs to be like this. The majority of the tonnage needs to come from compounds, and the rest comes from isolation. And of course, the more volume you need to progress, the more you're going to have variations of the compounds, etc. And that's a proper full body. So in a day, I'm not going to give you an arbitrary number, but you should have a select amount of compound movements that are completed by other movements. And also understand that, and I'll get to that later, that because the full body template is going to require you to hit the entire body every single day, you have a lot of room for variations. You don't need to hit the bench 3 times a week. You can do variations of the bench, which is in the long run going to help you stay healthy. So that's pretty much how to run the full body. Now we're going to get into the greediness and the realism. When you program, there are 2 things I want you to keep in mind. Besides the technical aspects and the numerical values, I want you to keep in mind that you need to stay realistic and you need to reject greediness. A program that's too greedy is going to be time consuming and give you no extra benefits or even fatigue you so that you regress. And that is aligned with realistic expectations. And a lot of people who run full bodies are not realistic. They do too much and they think that it's doable, and they don't realize that regardless of if you hit different body parts, you're still getting fatigued. So if you do a bench followed by a squat, okay, you didn't use your legs for the bench, but you're still going into the squat fatigued. And that's especially true for people who have low cardiovascular endurance. You're going to end up limited by your lungs and your heart and not by your muscles. I personally preach supersets because I tell you, and I tell people on this channel all the time, that if you hit antagonistic muscle one after the other, or muscles that have nothing to do with one another, your loss in progression in performance is minimal, but it's still there. And in the context of a full body, it gets worse and worse and worse. Because if you have a long list of exercises, by the time you're at exercise 5, the fatigue that compounds, even if you didn't hit the muscle, now makes it so that you're going to be underperforming. You need to avoid that. You need to stay realistic. And the realism comes with the variations. So it's something that is crucial for programming. When you program, before you do anything else, even before you pick your template, you're going to write a list of your exercises. Exercises that you've already done. Not that you like, not that you want to do in the program, that you've already done. It's essential. And when you write that, I suggest you write trees of specificity or compound movements or patterns, regardless of how you want to call it. I call it trees of specificity. Or you're going to have a list that is going to be bench press and then all of the variations of the bench press, starting from the most specific to the least specific. And the longer the list is, the more advanced you are for the most part. That list is going to be the longest for people who do full body because you are expected to hit that body part every time you train. And so you need to have an arsenal or movements that are at the ready at all times. And to end this, I also want to talk about the variations of intensity. Because again, the same body parts are going to be hit, you're going to have a very strong manipulation of volume and intensity, because if you constantly hit the body part at the same rate, you're either sandbagging or you're hitting it way too hard and you're fatiguing yourself for nothing. So there needs to be variation. And that's when the applications of intensity come into play, because let's say you do full body 3 times a week. One of these weeks can be a heavy chest day where you're really going to hammer the chest. Another could be a medium day and another could be a light day. Now, understand that the separation in values need not be excessive. I see too many people do that. They have an heavy day where they're only going to do 1 rep, and then they're going to have a light day where they're going to do 20 reps. That's too much variation. Those rep ranges are too far apart. You can do a 3 to 6 or a 2 to 5 or a 3 to 5 on your heavy day. You can do a 6 to 10 or a 6 to 12 on your medium day, and you can do a 8 to 10, 8 to 12, 8 to 15 on your light day. These are much closer. And on top of that, you don't have to repeat the same movement pattern every single time, which means you also have a chance and a potential to bump up the intensity a tiny bit. So you could have your heavy and medium day be separated in terms of rep range, but let's say the third day you're going to hit a different type of bench or bench variation, you could do a 6 to 10 again. You could copy the rep range of the medium day because it's a variation. It's not going to have the same impact on your recovery, and it still has carryover. So that's something to keep in mind. It's extremely important. And we're going to segue into the reason why I talked about that is because a lot of beginners and novices don't know about volume and intensity. And in reality, it doesn't matter because they shouldn't have to know. The reason why they shouldn't have to know is because they will progress regardless. So if it's good if they're a little bit curious about it because it's going to give them a leg up in the future when they become intermediate, and I encourage that because it's going to help you start a solid program that you make yourself. But I also understand that it's not the case for most people. And so the issue with the Fullbody is that it's a template that is highly recommended for novices. And I am personally going to warn you with this. Fullbody, because of what I just described, requires a lot of understanding of programming. A lot of people think that because it's Fullbody, you just do the Fullbody. It's simple. It's not. Far from it, actually. The lack of flexibility makes it simple because you just have to follow it to a T. But it also entails that since you have to follow the template, you need to make sure that all of the pieces fall together, and novices don't know how to do that. And so, in terms of who should be doing Fullbody, novices should actually refrain from doing Fullbody if and only if they end up doing a Fullbody that was described as the way that I presented at the start. A Fullbody for a novice doesn't have to be 3 days a week, but if it is 3 days a week, it needs to give the novice room to breathe. Because Fullbody days tend to be long, and you don't want a novice spending 2 hours in the gym. They don't have the work capacity. And so the fix I have for this is Fullbody every single day. And you might think, okay, that's counterintuitive. You just told me that it's too much work. Yeah, it's too much work if you don't know how to program the Fullbody. But with what I just described and the variations, you could do a Fullbody where one day you're going to have the heavy bench, one day the heavy squat, one day the heavy deadlift, one day could be something that is more going to be focused on the upper body with the arms, and one day could be more focused on the abs and GPP. You can still do Fullbody days running a program like this, because in reality, and that's sort of the way that you're supposed to navigate around this, I explained that in the push-pull leg template review, yeah, you're supposed to hit Fullbody, but at what intensity? Because in reality, if you do 5 bodyweight squats, you just hit the lower body, so you did your Fullbody, right? That's a trick, but in reality, it's going to be extremely beneficial for novices because, and you've seen that in the programs that I present in my playlist for the free programs, I encourage novices to get familiar with the gym and to work shy of their maximum recoverable volume because they don't have to push the bar, they don't have to push the bill, they'll still make progress. Of course, for some people, it might be unbearable to have to go to the gym every day. So what they can do is 5 days throughout the week. And if they really want to do 3 days, they can do it. And I have a template that you can actually go check out in the playlist I just described that is going to be focused on one compound movement a day with the rest of the body being hit sparingly. And the sparingly is the key word. If you run Fullbody, there's a strong potential you're going to run yourself into the ground as a novice. Avoid that at all costs. So that's for novices. For intermediates, there's not much to say about intermediates because 3 to 4 times a week is a great frequency for intermediates, and they also will have a much better understanding of how to run the Fullbody. So they can absolutely embrace that, and they should do it the way I described, which is heavy, medium, and light, but with the rep ranges that stay in relevant rep ranges. And I'm going to get into the issues afterwards, but some novices might find that it's already not enough volume for them because of the nature of Fullbody. That entails that if you want to actually complete the template, you can't spend too long on the body part, but I'll get to that. Now we'll talk about advanced. And actually, I think that Fullbody works the best for them because they're the ones who are supposed to have the better understanding of programming, and they have the work capacity and mental stamina to stay throughout. Every time I see someone who's advanced who does a Fullbody, if they do a real Fullbody with upper and lower trained, their sessions are long. And their sessions are not only long, they require a lot of focus because there is something that I'm going to refer to afterwards as strength work multiplication that happens. Because compounds are going to be the most significant portion of the program, you have to stay ready to hit compounds with high intensity several times a workout. It doesn't fit the need of everyone. Me personally, I can't do that. That's the reason why I run a gentleman split. I open with my strength work. After my strength work, I don't want to have to focus on intensity again. I sometimes have days where I'm going to have an echo of the strength work somewhere else in the program, but it's going to be a variation, something that I know is not stressful, because for me, volume is king. That's the way I grow. I understand that not everyone works like that. And so for people who are very high responders to intensity or who just enjoy it, full body might be the way. And we'll get to the frequency that you should be hitting that right now. So in terms of frequency, I've done the same thing with the gentleman split, not with the push-pull leg, because the push-pull leg is 3 days, so it's either 3 days or 6 days. Of course, you can take the push away or the leg away, but the template makes it so that the frequency is not going to be too much of a headache. And the upper-lower is sort of the same thing, where it's upper-lower, it's 2 days. Do you want to do an upper-lower? Great, 4 days. Mathematics. But for the full body, there's nothing in full body that tells you how much you're supposed to train. It's just telling you hit the full body. So okay, so what does that mean? How often do I hit that? I just said that novices can do it every day. Okay, what about intermediates? 3 to 4 times. Okay, what about advanced? For advanced, it becomes more complicated. Because advanced lifters, depending on who you are and what you respond to, might need more frequency than that. I know that for me, if I had to shrink my program down to less than 5 days, for example, I would be in a pickle because I don't have the space to fill all of that volume. I'm not strong enough to make it up with intensity, so it's complicated. It's a challenge you're going to have to deal with. But for me, just like with the gentleman split where I told you that there are certain range where I just think it's not applicable, I'm also going to be telling you the same for the full body. For me, for people who are more advanced, the extremes on both sides are going to be tough. 7 days, 6 days, 5 days, it's tough for full body. Honestly, it's going to be really tough to run if you do a lot of volume. And if you actually want to go into the gym and get significant work done. 1 and 2 days is in the same ballpark. How are you going to get all of your weekly volume in 1 or 2 days? It's really, really hard. And for the most part, the people who tend to run that type of program, there's sandbagging involved, or there's a portion of the body that are not training, and therefore they can make up for it. 3 times is good. 3 times we're entering into the ballpark of what's doable. It's going to be more focused for people who like intense workouts and who are willing to go through all of those sets and stay at a high amount of focus. 4 days, sweet spot, in my opinion. 4 days for full body, 3 to 4 days. That's when we'll start talking, it start becoming interesting. It opens up possibilities. You can play around with the volume and intensity more because the frequency is wider. And a wide frequency, the more days you train a week, the more volume and intensity manipulation you have. The less you train, the tougher it becomes because the smaller the space where you're supposed to fit all of that is. That is a strong gust of wind. Volume, let's get to volume. So my issue with full body is that you're going to get a lot of volume in. It's full body, so you're going to train the entire body. You get a lot of tonnage from that. Issue is, where is that volume going? What body part is being hit and how hard can you hit the body part? Because for me, if I do a chest day, I'm going to have a chest exercise followed by another one. So it's 2. But how doable is that for a full body exercise or day, right? Because if you reverberate each compound movement twice, how long is it going to take? 2 knee flexions, 2 hip hinges, 2 vertical presses, 2 horizontal presses, 2... It's not doable, right? And that's what I said before. Don't be greedy. It's not doable. Never try to do that. Never try to just stack as many compound movements as you can. You need to spare yourself, and you spare yourself by moving those exercises on different days and upping the intensity of the main movements. So that's something to keep in mind. But you're dealing with a challenge, again, because you have to hit the full body. And so if you actually want to follow the template, you're going to have to find different exercises to complement the entire body and hit it. This also means that when it comes to applications of templates, the full body is extremely tied to supersets because it's going to save you a ton of time. The more strength work you have, the more straight sets you have, the more time you waste because you're resting in between. And that can be the death of the full body. If the workout is, 2 hours with just 5 or 6 exercises, understand that a lot of that is taken by rest time. you need to put exercises in that rest time. And what is going to go there? Isolations. The skeleton of the template is going to be compound movements. You have space in between the compound movements as supersets for isolation work. That way you don't waste time. So I encourage you to do that for your volume. For your intensity, you're going to apply what I spoke about, which is strength work multiplication. You will have multiple iterations of the strength work. You will have to do that to an extent, but as I said, it's going to be graduated. You won't do max effort intensity for every single movement pattern. What you can do is have the number one movement of the day, let's say an horizontal press, be the top strength, the top set where you're going to give it everything. Then you do a knee flexion variation in an 8 to 12 rep range. Then maybe you can follow that up with something like a vertical press or a vertical pull, etc. Understand that when it comes to doubling down on lower body movements, full body is really not the best idea. I think that push-pull leg and the upper-lower templates have a much better overall condition and ability to allow you to do that, to do a squat, a heavy squat, then a hip hinge. The issue with the full body is that on top of that, you're going to do the upper body as well. So it's not going to work. So in terms of templates that benefit from splitting their hip hinges and knee flexions, the full body is one of them, which explains why I said that 2 times a week, 3 times a week is complicated, because it means that you have 3 days available, one for squat, one for deadlift, and one where maybe you do one or the other, but it means that you're going to have a frequency that might be a little bit stunt. And that's when variation comes into play. So everything that is going to be low impact, like glute arm raises, hyperextension, some amount of leg curls, some amount of, I'm not going to say leg extension, but a way for you to hit the extension of the knee without overloading your back. All of that is going to be your bread and butter, and it can be supersetted, so you're actually in luck. So keep that in mind with the intensity and the way you apply the strength work. For the exercise selection, as I said, it's going to be a lot of choice. It's going to be an open buffet, and you're going to have to do that. Keep in mind that it doesn't mean you have to go overboard. You need to stay within the range of what makes sense. And with full body, I have found that having days A and days B, or at least having mirror days, is not super necessary, meaning that you could have a full body template that is 4 days that just repeats itself ad infinitum, because you are very unlikely to repeat the same movement twice during the week, because you have a very low amount of space for intensity to exist. And so that's one of the templates that actually can work as minimalism. Minimalism not in terms of exercise selection, in terms of rotation. You don't need rotations in full body. You can have them if you want to, but understand that because of the way the full body works, each rotation you have in is going to complicate the program. And that's the reason why I said novices need to be careful with full body, because it's one of the templates that actually, if you know what you're doing, you can push really, really hard. You can really make something that is complex but not complicated. But most novices, complex and complicated means the same to them. They won't be able to work around it. So that's for the exercise selection. For the length, you're going to have to pay attention to baseline and the buildup of fatigue. Too many people do full body and they don't realize that the end of the training is just garbage because they're too tired. And it's something I've described in the hypertrophy series. The further down an exercise is in the day, the less you're going to be able to progress on it because the less energy you have. And guess what? If you're going to skip something, it's going to be that. So the exercises at the end need to be deprioritized. They need to be the ones that are not the most important. But in terms of what you can skip, full bodies are not really super forgiving. You're going to have to do the entire training for the most part. Because if you repeatedly skip 1/4 of the training, that's 1/4 of the body on the training, especially if you program it every single time the same way. So I suggest you mix it up. I already told you to do it with the strength work, but don't always do chest, triceps, lower back, and glutes. Don't do that. Mix it up. Change them around. So that way, it, one, creates variety so you're not bored, and two, it avoids that type of issues. And so in terms of baseline, again, as I said, you're going to have to be in tune with the body, which requires experience. So it's not for beginners, because you are going to adapt the program based on the way your body reacts to it. And so if you find that the day is too long, you might have to up the frequency one day, because all of the volume that couldn't be done on those days need to be transferred into that 4th day. And you'll see that you'll make much better gains with that. And one question you might have is, okay, you've been talking a lot about certain portions of the muscle groups or compound movements, but you've told us not to do all of the compound movements in the wood. How am I supposed to hit my entire body if I'm not allowed to do that? Well, you're going to have to cheat. Just like people who do upper lowers properly cheat, they do lower body movements on uppers, because if they don't, how are you supposed to fit all of your volume? And so you're going to have to utilize certain strategies. For example, if you do a squat, you technically work to the lower body. Some people could say, oh, it doesn't hit the hamstrings. It hits them, not super hard, but it does. So guess what? The lower body is taken care of by squats. You superset that with some calf raises, you're Gucci. That's it, that's done. You're supposed to hit the bench, you're supposed to hit the chest, the upper back, the upper body, just do bench. Oh, the tricep doesn't get hit enough, superset that later in the day with some tricep extensions. You're going to have to be smart like this. So for example, if you cannot superset the tricep extension with the bench, well, maybe afterwards you have something like a vertical pull that doesn't require the triceps. Perfect place to put a superset for the tricep. You're going to have to be desynergistic like this. The compound movement will be supersetted with things that are not involved in it, if that makes sense. And that is going to allow you to have realistic full body days. So be careful with that and utilize what you can utilize. Does it mean that you're going to just neglect body parts? No. As I explained, on different days they're going to be hit harder. So when you do your hip hinge, now the hamstrings get hit harder. Do the quads get hit? No, but they got hit beforehand. That's the logic. That's also why if you do it only twice a week, you're going to have problems. In terms of recovery now, and that's going to be my last point actually. When you talk about recovery and full body, you're also dealing with a problem. And it's my last point because it's the reason why I don't like full body. It's much tougher to let the body part recover when you're supposed to hit them all. Of course, it's mitigated by the fact that you're not really hitting them all. You're sort of lightly touching some of them on certain days and hitting them really hard on other days. But still, you could potentially bring up the point that getting a light pump or some exercise for those body parts helps recovery. I agree with that, but understand that it's not a precise science, it's an art. It's really complicated to maneuver around that. Because if you go too hard, great, now you're going to be under-recovered for the day you're supposed to hit them hard. It's again why I don't recommend novices do that. It's tough to manipulate, and you can easily end up spinning your wheels with that type of program. So be really careful with full bodies. And it's also the issue that the frequency is going to create, because if you do 6 days a week full body, how are you supposed to recover? Unless you're a novice that doesn't have the work capacity and therefore doesn't have the ability to really damage the baseline, it's not doable. You're just going to waste your time. It's going to be wasted times in the gym. And it's the same if you do only 2 days. Okay, great, you do 2 days. But your baseline and work capacity doesn't allow you to accumulate enough volume to make up for the entire week. So you're going to recover from one of the training in 2 days, and then what? You hit another day, and then what? You do nothing for 4 days? It's the issue of low frequency with the full body. Understand that recovery is the period of time where the muscles grow. But if there was no stimulus for the muscle to grow, at some point nothing happens. And I'm going to end on that, but it's a teaser to a video I'm going to make about recovery. Recovery is like a pot. You fill the pot with liquid, and as the liquid goes down, it's being sent into the muscle and it grows. Issue is, you understand at some point that if the pot is empty, you waiting another few days afterwards does nothing. You might get some additional benefits for the tendons, but for the muscles, it does nothing. And I'm going to leave you with that. So that's my review for the full body template. I'm actually going to review every single one. I already have the gentleman split, the bro split in a sense because I dissed it, the push-pull leg, and now this. And I'm going to continue. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.